Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mitch Taco Bell. I'm a retired Marine Lieutenant Colonel. If you have not joined my podcast before, welcome aboard. And tonight I've got a special guest. We are actually going to talk about the direction that the Marine Corps is going in. And it's one of those things that a lot of people have questions about. And tonight we're bringing on board a Marine consultant, retired Marine Lieutenant Colonel Mike Kennedy, who has the nuts and bolts of this whole thing and the op plans, and he's able to break it down shotgun style, just like I said in the introduction. I heard this speech about 2 weeks ago, and it was phenomenal, and I loved it. And I go, this is what people need to understand, the direction that we're going in and all the drastic changes that we're making. So without further ado, I'd like to bring on Mike Kennedy. How you doing, sir?
Hey, Taco. How you doing?
I'm doing well, doing well. I tell you what, very excited about this tonight. Your PowerPoint's great. Your points are awesome. It really starts to make sense when you look at how we are planning on doing things as a Marine Corps and the direction we're going. But without jumping into your Wheaties here, why don't you go ahead and do your PowerPoint, and I'll probably ask some dumb aviator questions as we go along. But what most people don't know is your call sign is Magilla the Gorilla. If you guys don't remember him, he was a cartoon. And
You're quick. Very impressive.
If you look at Colonel Kennedy, he is 60-some years old and in great shape and still could thump anybody like a gorilla. So got a awesome deal there. Are you finding that PowerPoint?
Yeah, I've got it. I've got it up. Does it show yet?
Oh yeah. Here we go. Okay, folks.
I see a black area, but I don't see it yet.
Yeah, I see it here, right here on my deal. Add to the screen. We had this working earlier.
Want to try it again? I can.
Yeah.
Cut
Sure.
it out and try it again.
Sure.
Okay. All right, let's try this one more time.
We actually did this. There it goes. All right. Perfect. I love it when a plane comes through. So go ahead. So we're looking at, of course, the virus China, or the entire country of China, which has become a virus in the South Asian Sea, China Sea.
Yeah, so Taco, first of all, you're digging pretty deep if you're getting a fighter pilot to explain this crap to you. But being the sort of the only Lance Corporal on air here, the Commandant came out with, every time you get a new Commandant, he comes out with guidance. And the guidance he came out with and the plan he's set out on is all centered around this thing called force design. And everyone else thinks it's focused on China. And there's an operational sort of premise behind it called EABO, or Expeditionary Advanced Base Operations. And it's an eye-opener. And so the first thing you're going to hear about this thing is kind of spooky. You're not going to like it. But as you start to learn about it, it turns into a great little science project. So I'm going to run through slides, and I guess you've got the instructions for these guys. If they have questions as we go along, shoot those out, and we'll do this. Thanks to Perkins, there are 2 Marines doing PowerPoint. Classic. However, I'm not a Microsoft geek. I've got Keynote. It's a Mac because those are easier. All right, so we're making this work. So as we go here, again, the Commandant came out and he said, force design is my #1 priority. And anytime you get a new Commandant, they always want to tweak a few things, and that's normal. That's okay. But in this particular case, he had a pretty drastic plan. He came out a few months later with this thing called Force Design 2030, and if you read through it, it's awful. I say that in the kindest way because it's written for a different audience. Instead of youngsters like me, this is written for Congress, staffers, budget types that have to make this thing work. But if you're an operational guy, it worries you a little bit. And so the only way to get into it is to understand the whole process. So as we do this, I'm going to describe what force design is, how it fits in with EABO. But as I talk to a lot of guys, again, who are more operational, they're going to think about aviation, fires, C2, and digital interoperability. How the hell are we going to carry this thing off? Because it's quite a bit different from how we've done business before. So as we go through this, the importance of this, hey, as he says in his book, EABO is evolving, and you'll see that as we talk about what it's all based around. New equipment, new techniques, all going to be required, but you have to understand commander's intent, and you have to understand it kind of like the old, if you remember Krulak's, the 3-block war, how we used to have to understand how we fought that. Well, Congress and the public are going to kind of have to need to understand how power projection has changed. And this is not just the Marine Corps. This is the Navy. This is the joint force, especially in something like the Pacific, because you're going to see it, how that whole environment has changed as we go through this. So again, questions as we go along, because we're going to talk about some stuff. The bottom line in all this stuff is when we create these briefs, it's not to say this is what we're doing. This is how we're going to do it. Here's what I recommend. This is for everybody to kind of, you be the judge. You figure out, does this make sense? Figure out what are the missing pieces, where are the gaps, where are the holes in this plan, because it is somewhat complex. So the first thing the Commandant said when he came out with his guidance, he says, hey, Marine Corps, we are not organized, trained, equipped, or postured to meet the demands of this future operating environment. And we're going to talk much more in detail about what that is. And he says that significant change is required. You know, again, Marines, yeah, he talks significant change. You don't know what that is until you actually see it. And then you're going, holy cow, this is kind of a big deal. And at the bottom there, to be aligned with the National Defense Strategy and the Defense Planning Guidance. So this is all high level stuff.
Now, how much of this stuff, like the op orders and stuff, are based off of just war gaming and, you know, projected losses and this and that they sit there and think about?
So before General Berger became the Commandant, he was the commanding general at McCittick, where they do all of those wargaming and all those types of things. He did a lot of studying on this. And as I'll show you here in a couple of slides, this just didn't pop up. It's just the first time it's grabbed our attention, because he's the first general to do something about it. Now, whether he's doing the right thing, whether he's doing too much or too little, again, you be the judge as we go through. But again, the first point there is significant change is on the way, and things are evolving rapidly. To give you an idea, in his objective force, and that's what he calls the force that it's going to take to do this, he says we got to get rid of 12,000 Marines. Right off the top, that just scares the dickens out of you. But then as you start to build this and you start to look at what is going away, all the reds is stuff that's going away and the greens are stuff they're adding. And when you start to see that infantry battalions are going away, reserve infantry battalions going away, all of our tanks are going away. We're getting rid of 16 artillery batteries. That kind of gets your attention. And on the right-hand side, on the ace side, fighter attack squadrons, the F-35s are going to go from 12 to 10 per squadron. And we're getting rid of 3 MV-22 squadrons, 3 heavy CH-53 squadrons, and 2 light attack squadrons. That's big.
Yeah, that's huge.
And then the thing to start get a sense of, though, what is he adding? What does he think we need to get rid of versus what do we need to add? LAR, mobility, rocket batteries, long-range fires, increase of VMGR, the refuelers. Clearly, we are going to have to go longer ranges, and what we've got isn't going to get us there. And then additionally, we're adding 3 VMU squadrons, but these are not the old small UASs. These are Group 4 and Group 5, high altitude, long endurance, some carrying weapons. We
like
are
predators.
We are moving into the world where there's going to be fewer and fewer pilots. Let's put it that way. So
I still think they need MV-22s because of the range of those things. You could put a tanker out there and they could hit off the tanker.
I completely agree, Taco. And as we go through this, again, our chore is to is to evaluate, boy, do we really need to get rid of those? He says that they use somewhat of a systems engineering approach, that if we got rid of this many Marines, infantry, then we only needed this much lift. But we've always been lift constrained. I would have much preferred keeping the MV-22s and the CH-53s because of the longer distances and the stuff we're going to have to haul around. We're going to need that mobility, in my opinion. But again, until you crunch the numbers, you don't know what you're going to get.
When you say we're less than 12,000, what are they looking at total strength force wise? I mean, I think it was 186,000 when I joined.
What are we, 182, 184, drop 12,000. That's where we're going.
Wow.
Yeah. So again, the one thing that I always remember about being at that, the headquarters always talked about, you never, ever, ever cut structure because you'll never get it back. So we got to make sure that we get back the stuff that we need to do this. It's going to be real colorful. So he talks about this, and this is his plan, right? So I'm thinking, okay, we're going to have some time to study this, and then, we'll see what really goes away. But this is February of last year, and you can see how much he's already cut. It's gone. Wow. These are things that are deactivated, moved on. They've moved those Marines and that equipment out. It is, he's not kidding. So we're going down this road. So we're doing this. So now let's talk about, wow, what, that's a lot. And what is the plan exactly? And if you read the pub, again, you'll shake your head. And I'll show you a slide here. I think the next slide even, it'll just scare the dickens out of you. So why do we even need a force redesign? So we got to talk about it. Well, it's all about this future operating environment. And EABO and the way that it's written, I'm going to go back here. It's written with slippery terms. And I've got the slippery terms there kind of in red. Adversary-based, cost-informed, advantage-focused. That's just crap to me. But I suppose it means stuff on the Hill when you're talking to budget guys.
Right.
When you read this, the key things to get out of this that I got out is a future naval operational concept. Okay. Resiliency and forward presence requirements of the next paradigm of U.S. joint expeditionary operations. Okay, that's kind of fluffy. So defeat adversary attempts to execute counter-intervention and fait accompli strategies. We're going to talk much more in detail about what that really means, because the way this is written, unless you're familiar with it, it doesn't mean anything, at least to most people that I've talked to. So as we talk about this, the thing that I got out of this is further down here as we talk about employing long-range precision fires directed at dislodging U.S. forces dependent on legacy bases, all of our forward deployed bases, fixed infrastructure, and large targetable platforms. Okay, carriers, large ships, LHAs, LHDs, these are high-value ticket items. Okay, now he's starting to, all right, now I'm starting to get this. But as we go through, let's peel that onion back a little bit. The first thing that I wondered is, how did this sneak up on me? I've been following this crap for a long time, and this slide kind of shows the evolution of doctrine. And you can see the purple there is a joint doctrine. Then the tri-service doctrine is Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard. And expeditionary doctrine is on the far right, except for the bottom part where it says force design. But all of this is fed from the National Security Strategy and the National Defense Strategy and the Defense Planning Guidance, those red dots at the top. Well, If you look at the dates on these things, way back up at 2007, the Navy and the Marine Corps came out with this, a cooperative strategy for sea power in the 21st century. And I remember reading that and going, garbage, didn't mean anything to me. Then you see the joint pubs come out, Joint Operational Access Concept, JOAC, 2012. And what you'll see as a recurring term here is all about access. Access to what? And we'll see. And you'll see that changed to air-sea battle. And that was kind of an unpopular thing. I think the Army didn't like that one. So they changed the name to the worst doctrinal pub in history, JAM-GC, the Joint Concept for Access and Maneuver in the Global Commons. I had to look up in Wikipedia what the Global Commons were. Essentially, it's like everybody's space, stuff that's not claimed by any other country. So this is just freedom of navigation type stuff.
Right.
NAMGC. So access, access, access. So now if you flip flop over to the right side and you look at the expeditionary doctrine, we have literally been a machine gun, belt-fed machine gun of expeditionary operations doctrine. EF-21, then to MOC, or the Marine Operating Concept, littoral operations in contested environments, LOCE, and finally EABO, Expeditionary Advanced Base Operations, of which force design was meant to be able to execute EABO. And in the far right-hand side, you can see there, I even have to squint at it here, it's a tentative manual for EABO operations. It came out last month. I just read 3 chapters earlier today because it's fresh off the pages. It's pretty spooky. So given that, this did not sneak up on us. It's been coming, but General Berger, to his credit, has been one of the first to really react to, we've got to be able to do this. So the obvious question is, do what? What does this look like? So it's about weapons, long-range precision weapons specifically, a lack of access to the littorals because of those weapons in order to do sea control, sea denial, and power projection. We'll talk about those missions here in a bit. And really kind of what it's all about, the relative inexpensive cost of their long-range missiles versus our very expensive, very vulnerable carriers and amphibs. That is what it's all about.
They're hypersonic missiles that can go across and take out a 5,000 crew aircraft carrier is not very advantageous to us.
Well, we're not quite to hypersonic missiles yet. The ones they have now are ballistic and cruise missiles, but we're heading in that direction. So when he talks about this future operating environment and that it's evolving, it's exactly what you're talking about. As we go to hypersonic weapons, as we go to energy, directed energy weapons, all of these kinds of things are going to change the way we do business. You know, it's like the early days of IADS, integrated air defenses. Everybody goes, well, we'll never be able to fly over bad guys again, but we found a way. And we were able to roll back those defenses. Well, this is the same thing. And we kind of have to look at it in that same light of, you know, just because they say that they have these long-range precision weapons, there's a lot of stuff that goes into actually making them hit the target and you dying. So it's not a done deal, but it is a threat and it is a risk that in peaceful times, a lot of people aren't willing to do. So we'll talk about that. Then we'll talk about these fancy French words at the bottom and these ephemeral terms like gray area tactics, because again, they talk about this crap like you're supposed to know it. And then until somebody explains it to you, then you go, oh, that's okay. What that is. So pressing on. In my world, a picture is worth 1,000 words. I need to see, what does this look like? I need crayons to be able to draw on this. So, you know, the fighter pilot in me goes, hey, I get this. This makes sense. So we did this brief a while back where we all read this book, 100-Year Marathon by Michael Pillsbury. Great book about China and how they see the world versus how we see it. And in their eyes, this is the end of what they call the century of humiliation. And they are pissed at the Western world. They may not say it, they're very polite, but most of their culture is all about deception.
Right.
Their end of the century humiliation, their goal is to be the #1 power in the world by the 100th anniversary of the Communist Party in China, which, by the way, is in 2049. And they are well on their way to doing that.
I was going to say, I think they are.
Yeah. So the other part that they do is they go back to their history and they look, especially before World War II, when the Japanese started taking all this crap from them, they look at the things that they owned and that they considered that they owned back then, and they're starting to lay claim to that. As such, that's why you see the island campaign, the increased aggressiveness to freedom of navigation ops, all of that kind of stuff, as well as the One Belt, One Road initiative. If you've heard about that, it's brilliant. Whether it works or not, we'll see. So let's take a peek at that. This is something I think I pulled out of The Economist. This is the old Silk Road routes,
sure,
from old trading paths. And you can see the old routes land and the old and new routes in sea. And they realize, unlike the United States, we are lucky enough to have two coasts. They have one. That's a weak underbelly when you're trying to feed and supply that many people with natural resources that you don't have. So they need control of that coast. That's how important that is. And that's how important that is for them being the #1 country in the world. This is a big deal. But as their backup, they're also creating those overland paths to get to the people that they can trade with and to get natural resources that way. But you can see that's a long ass drive, and there's a lot of ways you can interdict that. Control of that coastline is absolutely imperative to them. So that's what they're trying to protect. So how are they going to do that? As a note, this is not just a China thing. This is any country that's as advanced to be able to have these types of weapons to protect themselves. So we're going to use a South China Sea scenario as we talk about this, but really you can lay this out on any country, Russia, perhaps Iran, and others who are smart enough to spend their money on long-range missiles, precision missiles, and not necessarily on large armies. Mm-hmm. So maps, we're going to see what this looks like. Everybody in the audience, raise your hand if you know what UNCLOS is. UNCLOS is the United Nations Convention for the Laws of the Sea. And this is sort of the general gentleman's agreement throughout the world of who owns what in the water. Everybody sort of agrees. Everybody gets to 12 miles of territorial waters. Then they get this buffer zone, this contiguous zone that's another 12 miles. And then out to 200 miles from your coastline, that's your exclusive economic zone. In that exclusive economic zone, you get all the mineral rights, the fishing rights, all of that is yours. And so what's kind of interesting is the U.S. hasn't signed off on this treaty, yet we pretty much enforce it. My guess is there's lots of fine print and other things that they don't want to do, but that's sort of the general rules, the rules of the road, if you will. So now if you look at the South China Sea, we can see a little bit of that economic activity. So for oil, they estimate between 7.5 billion and 11 billion barrels of oil waiting for whoever's going to come take it. Now, that's a lot of oil. For fishing, about 12% of the world's fish catch comes from the South China Sea. And then shipping, literally 1/3 of the world's shipping passes through these waters. So this is kind of a big deal. These are the global commons. This is not in their exclusive or in their territorial waters. This is just stuff that passes that way. Of note, 40% by volume of China's imports come through there. 60% of that is value going through those waters. So you can see again how important these waters are to China. So did you catch Frank's comment about how 80% of all of our seafood comes from China? Seafood, like but they also bought all the pork. The pork manufacturers as well. I sent him another story on that. So it's it's pretty spooky when you see all the crap that they're buying up. So back to the waters, whereas everybody else plays by the rules of 200 miles, the Chinese, I think in 2010 said, no, we've got this 9-dash line. And this is the waters that are territorial to China. It's over 1,200 miles out there. And it impinges on several other countries' waters and exclusive economic zones. This is huge. So
they build these islands and then they project a 200-mile radius around them to.
No, they didn't. This is before they even started on the islands. This is, we're taking this water. All of this belongs to China. Again, they're trying to nitnoy and pick this. And their justification is, we owned those islands before World War II. We owned land down there. So therefore, all of this is our waters. Mm. So this is more of a close-up view of how that intersects everybody else's territorial waters. So you can see the Philippines, you can see Malaysia, you can see Brunei, you can see Vietnam. clearly there's some issues. You can also, since we have this slide up here, you can see the Spratly Islands, and then you can't quite see Scarborough Shoals, and you can see the Paracel Islands towards the north. These are going to be important because these are the ones where they started not only building, but they started sea reclamation. They put over 3,500 additional acres of land around these pieces of basically mud in the middle of the ocean, and they've built bases on them. Bases big enough for military aircraft, bases big enough for anti-ship missiles, as well as anti-aircraft missiles.
And how far are the Spratly Islands from Philippines? Because now seeing it on a map, it makes a lot more sense why they're very sensitive about it.
The Spratlys were claimed by the Philippines and are also claimed by the Vietnamese and are also claimed by China. So they've been contested for some time. Clearly, they're closer to the Philippines, but there's disagreement as far as historically who owns those islands. So with those islands, we go back, and now they're there in very faint letters on the they're very faint letters on the inside the 9-dash line. Oops, sorry, went backwards. So now people are going, wait a minute, these guys are getting kind of bossy. So the countries that are now in blue have started to kind of band together. You know, we kind of need to be on the same team, otherwise they're gonna start pushing us around. But what you'll notice is the ones that are in tan or whatever, mauve or whatever color, you know, some interior decorator is going to call that, those guys aren't playing because China's using its economic weight to keep them out of the game.
Oh, building ports and harbors and whatever, and financing everything.
Yeah, that as well as trade. If you're gonna, you know, if you're not going to recognize the 9-dash line, then we're not going to trade with you, and you're not going to have a market for your goods. So again, this is politics at, you know, global or international politics at its finest. The Chinese aren't stupid. They're really working this pretty damn hard. So now that they've got that stuff there, now you can start to see, and it's pretty small, but you can see all the bases. Now the orange doesn't show up, but those are the third party regional kind of guys. The blue dots and the blue airplanes are US bases that are forward deployed there. And then the yellow, mostly on the mainland China, are the Chinese, but you can also see that they have air bases on the Paracel and Spratly Islands. So there's a lot of capability in and around that region. Thus, it's been in the news a lot as being kind of a hotbed and where bad things could happen. So in addition to putting aircraft, we're going to put anti-ship cruise missiles. Again, in the old days, this is kind of standard. You know, coastal defense, right? But now that they have these islands, look how much of the South China Sea they can effectively do some sort of sea denial or sea control and limit the types and amount of ships that go through there. This is what it's all about. We used to do that with carriers, but now with these anti-ship missiles, how close do you want to get? You're one big carrier in the Pacific to some of those missiles. One strike, and you can do Pearl Harbor kind of damage.
Right.
Not only anti-ship missiles, but also surface-to-air missiles. I don't have any shown on this map on the Paracel or Spratlys, but they're there.
You know, I just read a book called a magazine in Wired called 2034, and they were doing freedom of navigation sails through this area, and then got taken down. The Chinese hacked us and then took the ships out. And I mean, it was a slaughter, killed everybody, sank them all. And there was nothing we could do about it.
It's a book called 2034. It was written by Admiral Stavridis. I'm butchering his name. He's a really smart guy. I forget the other co-author, but it's just out. I've got it on my reading list, but I haven't read it yet. But I hear it's kind of reminds you of the old Tom Clancy, you know, novel where it's real world, it's real life, but it's fiction.
Yeah. Well, taking everything that's in account today, it could definitely happen. I mean, do we get to the point where you have a president who doesn't push back against China and accepts the losses?
Yeah.
Not good. I'm
So
sorry. Go ahead, though.
no, so the other thing that added to that, you can see it up towards the South Korea, south of Japan, is the range of their fighters, Su-30s. They can range all the way out to Okinawa, and if you look further down, they can range Manila from the mainland. So again, this is normal coastal defense. They can go a long ways. If you add the long-range bombers, now you could see the HK-6 can range Guam. So someplace that we always considered kind of a safe haven, rearm, refuel, refit. Well, now bombers can range that. Now, can we defend that? Certainly we can. But you can see how buffered this coastal defense thing is now that they're starting to claim that this 9-dash line belongs to them.
Mm-hmm.
What is changing the whole thing, and the reason for this EABO, is this acronym right here, Mature Precision Strike Regime. And there's another M that you can add in there, Mature Maritime Precision Strike Regime, because it really, really affects the maritime world unlike anything that we've seen previously. So what is it all built around? It's all built around, yes, all of the stuff you've just seen, but now those anti-ship missiles, which are also ballistic anti-ship missiles and cruise missiles. And so they can go so far out that you start to scratch your head. Well, wait a minute. How far out are my high value assets safe? Where can they sail without being threatened by quite a number of long range missiles? So as you look at this, our most capable assets, carriers and amphibs, are now vulnerable, and they've been somewhat neutralized given that threat. Mm-hmm. So the old methods that we used to do, sea control, sea denial, and power projection, we're going to have to modify those. And what General Berger in this force design is doing is saying the Marine Corps is going to play a much more significant role in sea denial and by default sea control to enable power projection. We're having to fight our way in from a much further distance out now. So that's going to require a new plan, and that's what his plan is. You can see here both the short range, the DF-21Ds, anti-ship ballistic missiles, going out to about 1,500 kilometers. That is way the hell out there. And the DF-26, which is the intermediate range ballistic missiles, anti-ship ballistic missiles, going out to 35 to 55. It actually says four grand, but Mach Nix. The interesting thing is they developed these missiles while the U.S. and Russia had signed that intermediate ballistic missile treaty. We never built any. So now they've got missiles and we don't. We're catching up, which is one of the reasons we got out of that treaty. But you can now see how close do you want to get those carriers. So what this has effectively done is there's two lines in the sand, so to speak, what they call the inner island chain and the outer island chain. And the inner island chain is, hey, China kind of owns that on that side. And the blue forces are kind of restricted somewhat out to the range of those short range ballistic missiles, which is not so short range, out to 1,500 kilometers. So it becomes a bit of a challenge. How do we do business now? It becomes even more important because now if I overlay, let's say, a carrier strike group, and I overlay the radius, the range of a F-35 off the carrier, guess what? He's got longer sticks than we do. I can't even get him with airplanes before he can take out my carrier, theoretically. Mm-hmm. So this is the dilemma that EABO is structured to combat. So let's wind this watch a little bit more and talk about these missions: sea denial, sea control. Sea control is best described by the 3 Bs. For those of us who aren't sailors, we can blockade. We can keep all of the commerce ships and all the military ships from coming and going in those waters. We can bombard the shore if we can get close enough, if we have sea control, or we can put boots on the ground, power projection. These are the missions that the Navy has always done. And it's fooled us. It's kind of like you and I are aviators. We know what air superiority is. We've had that between the Air Force, the Navy, and the Marine Corps. We've been blessed with that. It's almost assumed. But in some cases, we have to roll back those IADs to really get air superiority and then air supremacy. Well, we've always had the seas covered except for now. And now sea control is a whole different game because of this mature maritime precision strike regime. So if those are the missions, let's talk about the missiles on the other side and what are the keys. One, they're expensive. So really only the big boys are only going to be able to afford them for now. Their cost and complexity increases with range, but range is not a constraint on accuracy. So if you're shooting cannon artillery, the longer you shoot, the less accurate they are. These, they don't care. They can shoot out to their max range and they're very accurate. If they can find you, if they can target you, they can kill you, theoretically. You can see the numbers of missiles they have, about 1,200 short range and fewer, we don't have an exact number, of the intermediate range. But because they're fewer, they have to be very careful about what they shoot them at. They need to make sure they shoot them at high value targets. If we don't show them any high value targets and they shoot them at lower value targets and we deplete that number of missiles, now we have options. But not to forget, they also have cruise missiles that supplement those, which are cheaper and have a flatter trajectory. The point of this is, as this is evolving, is these are like UAVs. You know, in the old days, only the military had them. Now every Tom, Dick, and Harry has one, and they're getting more and more capable. Well, these missiles are going to kind of become like that. And how long will it be before non-state actors have these? So this is not just a China thing. This is a real thing that could involve many other organizations. So now that we know those missiles, now that we know this, what you see is EABO says we've got outside forces and inside forces. The outside forces, well, you know, those are the high value assets, the carriers, the amphibs, C2 nodes, sustainment, follow-on forces. And they're only going to go inside when the conditions are right.
Right.
That all makes sense. Sadly, that's a lot of power projection stuff that's sitting out there. We can't get the good stuff in. So they create this thing called inside forces. Well, welcome to our world. This is going to be the Marine Corps. Yes, it's probably going to be, to a certain extent, a little bit of the Army as well, and a little bit of the Air Force. But the Navy is going to have to get us inside. And we're going to have to do that. We're going to have to be mobile, agile, and netted. Those sensors and weapons to the outside forces. The whole thing is they're going to send these small packages of Marines with either sensors and or weapons into those inner islands. And you're going to be the eyeballs and the sticks that are inside. And they're going to be small enough that they don't really qualify necessarily as a high value target. And we're just going to annoy the shit out of them and implement our own sea denial and sea control within there. To the point that we effectively might be able to blockade their own waters. And so unless they come find us, and unless they shoot all of those missiles at us, we're going to have issues.
So what about all of our troops in Okinawa, Japan, kind of caught behind enemy lines?
Exactly.
Or we'd be able to use them to...
So the very next slide, we're going to talk about what do you do if you're one of those inside guys? You know, in this particular case, for the Marines that are going to go in the inside forces, small footprint, small electronic signature, we want to complicate their targeting. We want to get in there, but we're not going to stay. We're going to move around. We're going to be moving small targets that are just going to annoy the crap out of them. What that does at the bottom line is it turns the cost imposition tables on the adversary. Now he's shooting expensive missiles, which he doesn't have a lot of, at small annoying targets that are limiting his ability to do sea control. Okay, that makes sense. But what are these inside forces? What can they do to stay alive? Well, certainly if you're a fixed base, if you're in Iwakuni, or if you're in Okinawa, or if you're in QB Point, you're going to have to harden the crap out of your base. Because if you watched 60 Minutes the other day and you saw what the Iranian ballistic missiles did to al-Assad, this is a threat. So if you're a fixed base that doesn't move around, they can target you pretty well. Fortunately, if you can move around, if you are on a ship and you're in the middle of the ocean and they can't find you, this is what you get. So the other way you can do it, you blind their sensors. The other way you do it is you infiltrate, you harass them, you send raids inside, you disperse so that they have so many targets they can't keep track of them. They can't conceal. You conceal your positions. You deceive them. The old days, you remember the books they wrote about what they did in World War II with decoys? we're going to have decoys out the yin yang out there. And lastly, we've got to have fires that can make a difference inside those bubbles. Counterfire. Daniel, I see he had a question there about what about our submarine force and ICBMs? Absolutely. These are just coming from the perspective of the Marine Corps, but it doesn't take into account all of the things that we do have as well. But one of the keys for this EABO concept is deterrence. They want to be able to get in there and going, don't screw with us because we're already here and we're going to shut you off. We're going to cut off all of your, for example, your oil shipments. With that many people, that's going to bring China to their knees pretty quickly. But again, this is all about, remember I told you we're going to talk about French words and gray zone tactics. We'll talk about those here in a second. What this is going to allow us to do is if we put multiple teams inside, now you've created this no man's land of sea control and sea denial. And now it's like, okay, we can barter all you want. You're not going to get any supplies through our stuff. And if you're going to turn this into a shooting war, but this also puts us close enough to be able to respond to keep them from doing something like Russia did in Crimea, right? Or Crimea. What did they do? What happened to them when they took over that land? Absolutely nothing. So that's what you call gray zone tactics or fait accompli. It's an accepted thing. They've already got it. And any response that we would do is not worth what would come of that. That's what this is designed to prevent is, well, what would we do if they went and took Taiwan? You know, if they think that they could do it without us starting World War III, they're going to do it. But if we've got stuff that already can come in there and really clamp down on them, now we have options and, as you can see, deterrence and time for our decision makers to pull their heads out and go, all right, now what do we do? It's a really interesting little science project. But while this slide is up here, before we kind of move on to others, think about, wow, how would I command and control that many teams over that far a distance? How do I get them there? How do I get them there untargeted? How big are these teams? What kind of comm gear do they got? What kind of weapons? What kind of sensors? Now you're starting to put this thing together. What new toys? I've gotten rid of all this crap you saw in the first couple of slides. I better get something back because I've got to do this and I don't have all the toys necessary to do that. This is where force design makes me nervous because are we going to get that stuff? You know, I don't like to give up something unless I got its replacement already in hand.
Yeah.
So needed capabilities, just like we talked about. These are the things we need. We've got to have boats, ships, aircraft that can get us inside those bubbles untargeted. And these are not small packages. You know, having a missile that can shoot out that far and create sea denial and sea control, it's not a small thing. So how do you sneak them in there? How do you give them enough mobility that they can shoot and scoot, as someone else pointed out earlier? Sensors and weapons. That's a big part of it. Also C2. And these things have to be interoperable with the Navy ships, which, you know, as Marines, that's been kicking our ass for 70 years. We've got to have interoperable systems. How are we going to sustain those guys? How soon do they go in? How long are they there? How are we going to hide bulk fuel, ordnance, and parts if we're going to run FARPs there? Yeah, it's going to be something.
Looking at those little islands, even the ones that have the jet bases on them, the Chinese have, it doesn't look like there's a lot of trees to hide behind on those things.
There's not. Now,
they're very small.
They've hardened those things, but even so, those fixed bases, much like our bases in Iwakuni and Okinawa and all that, if you don't harden them, you're still a fixed target, and you're going to be vulnerable. So again, this goes back to all these guys going on the inside. Footprint and signature, small, agile, move, deceive them where you're at. All of these are things that EABO and force design, these guys are doing OPTs like you read about, trying to figure out what do we need? How do we organize? And that pub that I showed you, the tentative manual, starts to do that. But any of us old guys start looking at the command structure, the command relationships, the things that are going to be, it's like, man, sustainment is going to kick our ass. How am I going to have weapons? How am I going to get command and control that far out there from the ship to these small nodes?
Well, what kind of boats are you going to have that you would be able to launch them from like a LPH to drive out 1,500 miles, 1,800 nautical miles?
So you may have heard
to attack somewhere.
You may have heard they're considering a number of different types of ships. What they call the LAW, the light amphibious warship. Again, if you look at the latest shipbuilding plan the Navy has, there's not enough of them, because if you saw all the places that we might have to go, we've got to get those teams in there. These ships have to be smaller, faster, and yet still be able to carry enough stuff to get in, offload, and out before they get targeted.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this is the real interesting part of this whole thing. So if you recap this whole EABO thing, long-range precision sensors and weapons is what it's all about. Ability to exercise sea control and sea denial to enable power projection. They're not assumed anymore. We're going to have to fight for it, and it's going to be different to how we've done it before. Again, if you just click the clock forward a few years, the missiles are only going to get more accurate and longer range and more of them. So that targeting problem, it's going to be challenging. So for us as the inside forces, we've got to have the tools to complicate their targeting, reduce their focus on those big high value assets, and still be able to do our mission. And as the very bottom line, must be resilient is the understatement of the year, because they're going to be shooting everything but the kitchen sink at us. This is the challenge the Marine Corps is going to have. This deterrence is going to have to be achieved differently than previous decades, preventing those fait accompli efforts, foregone conclusions, the gray zone tactics, which you can read about. The bottom line is provide the National Command Authority with time and options short of full conflict to respond. So questions, I mean, as we go through this, these are the obvious ones. What kind of stuff do we got to have? What size of boat is going to get me there? What is the signature of these packages? What's the footprint? How, what's the maximum size I can be before they just see me and kick my ass anyways?
Mm-hmm.
Other questions, how good are these sensors and weapons? The fallacy of A2AD is that anybody who flies or sails into these bubbles, they're not going to die, but there's risk. And so what level of risk are we going to accept? And how good are our defenses? How good is our deception? How easy is it going to be for us to hide? These are all big questions. What is the Marine Corps' role going to be? This is not going to be just a Navy fight, although it's primarily maritime. This is going to be a joint fight, and how we organize, how the Air Force plays, how the Army ATACMs are going to play into this. This is all going to be a part of the same thing. And recently, at the very bottom, you'll notice in the last budget cycle, I believe Congress turned the Marine Corps down for anti-ship missiles, because I believe we didn't make a good case to them about what EABO is and why we need it with the precision strike regime.
Right.
Let's see. Power projection. Is power projection to be a viable tactic? The way I look at it in the future, if you're not under the sea, you're going to be in a world of hurt, because technology is getting that good. But on the defensive side, what technological advancements make EABO moot, make it kind of go away? This is where this whole thing is. I don't know, and we haven't studied enough, and technology is changing so fast. We don't know what's going to happen. But what it's going to take is all these guys on the side over here, including that bonehead Rooster Rodriguez who's writing in. Hey, Rooster, I see you down there. Guys like that to think about, what are we missing? What are the gaps? What are the vulnerabilities? Rooster can talk all day long about UASs, and when you start doing those long-range UASs, some with weapons, some without, and controlling them over those spaces, it's a whole different game, especially when you talk about multi-domain operations. The Chinese are going to wreak havoc on the electromagnetic spectrum. So now, how are you going to control all this stuff? Every little bit goes. This is my $64,000 question. Will this strategy work? For how long? Can we execute this given that we don't have the right gear? How long will we wait to get that gear? Will the Navy actually follow through and buy the equipment? And were the cuts that the Commandant made the right choice at the right time? Because in this interim period, we are going to be more vulnerable to performing as many of the force and readiness 911 type missions that we used to do because we gave up structure.
Well, for 2 decades, we've been landlocked in a two-front war anyway.
Yep.
So my picture of this is more of an intertwined relationship with the Navy, almost going back to being the Department of the Navy in terms of joining them to be able to get on the ships, to get the small teams out there and be more flexible. But this isn't just only China. I mean, this could apply Mediterranean, Black Sea, Persian Gulf, insert teams and run them out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah. So again, I think the Navy has got they're going to have some really tough decisions because the Navy is used to big ships, big, powerful ships, overpower everything, but now they're just targets. And are they going to be able to change their culture to transition to things that are smaller, faster, more agile, that can hide? I see the only ones coming out smelling like roses of this whole thing is submariners. This is going to be a really tough problem. So in conclusion, this whole MPSR thing is going to continue to advance, and the hider finder competition thing is going to go back and forth. And eventually non-state actors are going to get these kinds of capabilities, just like they did with UASs, and they're going to do things with them. So these missions that we used to take for granted are now going to be work. And that's what, as Marines, we do. We adjust, we adapt, we overcome. But boy, this is a great science project. Again, I can't say that I completely agree with what the Commandant's done at this point, but I trust that those guys are doing OPTs and working through that. Abby Babby talks it down here. I think we're going to need those 12,000 Marines. He's absolutely right. We've never had enough Marines, and the types of Marines we're going to need, they're going to have to be smart sons of bitches because there can't be too many of them, but you're going to have everybody working some pretty high-tech equipment under really tough circumstances. So it's really going to be a training nightmare for the grunts and even for the ace, because it's going to change. The whole MAGTF thing almost doesn't appear in this whole concept of EABO, which is disconcerting to me because I know that we fight really well that way. But at the same time, I can also see the need for how do we do this power projection, this sea denial and sea control mission along with the Navy, because it's gonna be a tough one. And that, in a nutshell, is why this goes back to the guys in the audience and the guys who are still in and the guys who are civilians, to help Congress and the public understand how our world has changed because of these weapon systems and what we're going to need to do differently in order to make this work. So over to you for questions and concepts.
Let's see if we can get some questions from some guys out there, if they have any. I think you're right. The subs are going to be a huge asset in taking out a lot of these islands. Here's Rooster. We already shaped the battlefield from space. It's a Space Force conversation regarding. Oh man, it's probably overclassified.
Clearly, the people who thought of the Space Force were thinking ahead, because that's exactly right. However, the problem with Space Force is all that crap up there is very vulnerable. I mean, everybody and their brother is working on anti-satellite missiles and whatnot. It's going to be, again, there's the only place that I've seen that people can hide pretty well is submarines. And, and the technology, I read about this new technology not long ago, that they have this technology where they can shoot lasers from UASs at relatively moderate altitudes that creates a sound wave that then propagates under the water. And they have new receivers that can pick those up. So instead of dropping buoys, they can do this with UAVs, with lasers and special sensors, and do a pretty damn good job of anti-submarine warfare. So really, technology is kicking everybody's ass, and it's who stays ahead of each leap. Same thing with hypersonic weapons. How do you defend against something that's going Mach 6? We
Right.
don't have things that can track that. So, who gets out in front? That's going to be really interesting.
Well, China does a very successful job of stealing all of our state secrets and infiltrating companies anyway. So they're going to get it.
Yeah.
I mean, they'll get all of our stuff and just reverse engineer it and copy it before you know it. It's just amazing. Well, I don't think I have any other questions. You guys have any other questions out there? If you're listening, now's your time. Now's your time. Well, I tell you what, Mike, I really appreciate you coming out here and joining us because as I talked to you offline, it is a lot of this. I think a lot of people are getting worried about making that grip with the Navy again and being department of the Navy, but the men's department, and having to rely on them for blue dollars versus green dollars.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I have complete faith. He was my recruiter. I like him a lot, and I think that I had him on the show, and I asked him if he would give me one of his tanks, sell me one of his tanks he took out of service, and he goes, "Oh yeah, I got one, no engine, no tracks." I'm like, "No, that's not going to be good." Here's Abby. How to project air power, EAF guy. We know how to hide forward operating runways. AV8As you met, but
yeah. Abby, it was just before going online. I was reading the tentative manual that just came out, and the construct for the ACE, and I'm hesitant to use the word ACE, is a what is it called? It's a littoral anti-air team, and as a part of that, there's MWSS and ATC, all of those subsections that can go up and set FARPs and move those things around, because that's the only way that carrier aircraft are going to be able to do that. They're going to fly in with ordnance, gas up, go, maybe rearm, refuel, and then back to the carrier. That's the only way they're going to be able to get those guys in that I can see. And Colin talks about Vietnam becoming a valuable ally. Absolutely. All of those guys, all of those countries that we highlighted in blue are going to be absolutely critical. Even down as far as Indonesia and Singapore. If you close there was an Army study on using ATACMS there, and there's 4 straits that you can close in the South China Sea and virtually cut off China from everything. And they're very easy to do. All of those are going to be allies. So again, I think something that maybe this administration is doing something better on is starting to build allies and teams in order to achieve these ends, because China's going to be the bull in the China shop, so to speak, and they're going to push hard for this stuff. So if everybody teams up against them, then I think things will go well, and maybe buys us some time to figure out how we're going to do this EABO concept.
So we get these little ships that have rails on it. We launch a Predator drone off with missiles, flies over those little islands with the jets on them, take those jets out, then put our guys on there. Now we occupy the island. They could send missiles over and try to blow up the guys on there, but we got the island, we got airplanes. Who knows?
I think that the moral of the story is, if you're a fixed base, even if you're hardened, you're going to get hit and probably taken out of the picture, if you will. So it's all going to be about mobility, and that's going to be. They were talking about, for example, for sustainment, ships that reside primarily under the water. So fuel and ordnance vehicles that are underwater that can maneuver in close to shore and then offload stuff via other pieces. Anything that can hide or go fast and elude detection is going to be key. It's kind of like our early days of aviation with low observable aircraft. It's all about, I need to hide, I need to be a surprise, and pop up on the radar only when I want to.
Yep, sounds like the Soviets planned in the Fulda Gap. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, that's the European scenario. probably very much like that because of the long range stuff that they had. What's interesting this time is it's all maritime, and so the Navy really is going to have to think through this, and I'll be very curious to see if they can change as radically as General Berger is changing the Marine Corps.
Well, the CNO seems to be cooperating with them as a joint effort, so should be something that maybe they can pull off. It sounds like they're cooperating together. Let's hope.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, I really appreciate you coming out here and joining us tonight, McGilla. I love that. Oh my God. Here we go. Yeah, I remember that cartoon.
Yeah. Yeah, the guy in Australia, he had a pair of McGilla Gorilla socks. He wanted to give those to me, but they looked like they reeked to high heaven, so I didn't take them.
Yeah. How did you get the call sign? What'd you do?
It's going to cost you a lot more beers than that to
okay. All right. I'll catch you at the meeting. Hey, if you guys don't know, we have a Marine Metroplex meeting held the first Thursday of every month in DFW. And COVID kind of stopped us for about 8 or 9 months, but we're back in business. We're over in Dallas. So if you get on the internet and as my son would say, the interweb, and go explore, type in Metroplex Marines DFW. Our webpage will come up and you'll also see the address. Feel free to come over and have lunch. We have Marines spanning from World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and present. So tell you what, it's a good time. If you're a local DFW guy, I highly recommend you come out and hang out with us. You'll learn a lot from these guys. I think I had 2 more. Nope, that's it. Hey, I tell you what, Colonel Kennedy, I am going to pull you off, boss. And if you hang out a minute, I'll catch up with you in a second.
Roger that. Thanks.
All right. Hey, guys, thanks again for joining us tonight on Tall Tales with Taco. I really appreciate Colonel Kennedy taking the time. He put this brief together. He does a lot of consulting, breaking down nuts and bolts for the guys to understand. And I thought it was a great brief and something that maybe you want to share with your friends. Just if somebody always says, why are they getting rid of artillery? Well, HIMARS. HIMARS more accurate, more direct, more expensive, I think. But I look at that. No tanks. Well, we can't have tanks floating around on ships when you're taking down islands or something. So kind of think about that. My only question is, from the recruiting aspect, what are we going to do with all the gun grapes? All the guys that made like 70 on their EL, on their ASVAB. What are we going to do with those guys? Where are you going to put them? Grunts are too small. Can't put them in the grunts. Can't send them to artillery. We're going to have to find a new MOS for those guys. You know what I'm talking about. Anyway, thanks again for joining us. Look forward to having you again on another Tall Tales with Taco next Tuesday. Sit back, relax, enjoy your night, and I will see you guys next Tuesday. Hey, once again, Michael Costanza, thank you for my intro and for my exit. You guys will like this. Here we go. Take care.